Well, we have with us former Senator Tom Coburn. He's the author of a new book called Smashing the D.C. Monopoly. He joins us now from Washington with more, and we welcome to the 700 Club. Senator, it's good to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
Well, Pat, it's great to be with you. Thank you.
Look, what do you think of this tax bill that they just put through the Congress?
I think it's going to do remarkable things for the economy. There isn't a tax bill that's ever been passed that everybody likes. But in the long run, this is going to be very, very beneficial in terms of job creation, in terms of raising wages for middle income and lower middle income families. It's going to put more capital investment into our country, which is going to create more jobs and more opportunity. I think it's long overdue. I'm very thankful that they're passing it. I would have done some things different. I'd have paid for a portion of it. There's plenty of waste in Washington where they could have eliminated it, to where we didn't pass any of the cost of this on. But other than that, I think it's going to be a great thing because the optimism is coming back in America. There's some actual visionary leadership now that people want to see us succeed, want to see us get ahead.
I keep asking myself, how come the Democrats as a body oppose? There wasn't one Democrat voted in favor of this thing. What's wrong with them?
Well, Pat, it's the typical politics. It's all about next year's election. How do we make everything that the party in power does, how do we make it look bad? I mean, you can find things to complain about in this tax bill, but overall, you can't find things to complain about in terms of returning taxes to the American people. It's really quite ironic. I hardly ever got anybody on the other side of the aisle to help me cut spending. And one of their criticism is they said we didn't cut any spending to pay for it. Well, they certainly didn't lead on that, nor have they ever. And so it's all politics. And that's what America's sick of. They're sick of looking at the harping. What they want is real visionary leadership. They want people to get the right things and work on the hard things, like Social Security and Medicare, balancing the budget, not transferring debts to our kids. It's immoral. And I think you're seeing some of that leadership now in the Republican Party.
Your book is very intriguing. You said we're going to beat the system here. What are you proposing? You're talking about a constitutional convention and changing the Constitution. Could you elaborate on that?
Sure. It's actually not a constitutional convention. It's called a Convention of Amendments. It's a very limited gathering of the states. All states are involved in it. But to do that, you have to have 34 states that make the application and work on three areas. One, forcing fiscal responsibility on the federal government, make them live within their means, make them make the hard choices that they refuse to do, and I'm talking about the politicians. Number two, limit the scope and jurisdiction of the federal government to bring back more power, more liberty, more decision-making to the states. And then finally, limit the terms on both appointed and elected officials so that we don't have the careerism that's given us the $144 trillion in unfunded liabilities. So it's very straightforward. It's very simple. It was done as a routine matter before we had the Constitutional Convention. Matter of fact, a convention of states actually pulled together in Annapolis, which is what caused the Constitutional Convention to happen in the first place. And it's also very safe because the members who are sent as delegates from each of the states have to follow what their states have told them to do. And for example, people who are worried about that, Indiana made it a felony not to follow what your state directed you to do in this amendments convention. So it's about restoring the Constitution, not really changing it. It's about putting it back where it was intended to be by our founders in the first place and letting more decision-making, more freedom, more liberty be felt, had, and acted upon by the citizens in the states. And that's what was intended to begin with.
Well, do you think that the Congress is going to do something that will essentially take away their power and their long-term tenure? Do you think they're willing to go along with that?
No. The Congress isn't going to do anything, and that's what's great about this. The Congress doesn't have anything to do with this. This is the states When 34 states call for this amendments convention, the only thing Congress has to do with it is say, here's where you'll meet, here's the funds to operate it, and oh, by the way, our clerks, once you've passed any recommendations to the states, which then 38 states have to agree to, once you've done that, then we'll send them to the states. And then, then it's up to the states to decide if they want to put term limits on their members or if they think the Congress ought to live within a balanced budget scenario, live within their means. If the states think that our members of Congress ought to have to make the hard choices rather than continually kick the can down the road at the jeopardy of the living standard of our kids and grandkids.
Well, we've got that $20 trillion thing looming. But that's not the total. I mean, there are unfunded liabilities. How big are they, in your opinion?
The unfunded liabilities right now are $124 trillion. So you add $20 trillion of debt and $124 trillion in unfunded liabilities. What you tell the millennial generation is each year you're going to have to come up with $30,000 in either decreased standard of living, inflation, or payments of debt, just to keep even with where we are today. That's not counting any money that we might spend on Social Security and Medicare in the future after that 50 years.
Well, Senator, if we get our interest rates on our federal debt anywhere close to the market, that'll consume the debt. The interest on that will consume everything the government has to spend, won't it?
Well, interest, Social Security, and Medicare will consume 100% of the budget.
And that's it. Well, what about discretionary spending? They won't have any of that.
Well, there won't be any because there won't be any money. The question is how long will the rest of the world continue to loan us money at the rates that we're seeing today? And when they won't and when that stops, that's when everything starts falling apart. So why wait till that climactic moment? Why not do something now? Okay. And so the question I'm asking as I go around the country, I've been in 32 states this year, is what do you think is going to change Congress to start making the hard choices to fix the future? And of course, nothing will. And so what I tell people is here's a convention of states that has limited authority to make amendments in 3 areas and offer them back to the states for their approval. If you have an idea to fix our country that's better than that, I'll come help you. What I want is a future for our children and our grandchildren. And I would say this, it is highly immoral to steal from your unborn children.
There ain't any question.
And that's what we're doing in this country.
Well, now, just to clarify, what procedures do you go through to get all this accomplished? What's step 1, 2, 3 to get it done? Go ahead.
I'd be happy to answer that. The first step is to write an application to Congress that says what you would like to have a convention of states on. And we have a standard one that considers the 3 things that I mentioned: limit the scope and jurisdiction, fiscal responsibility, i.e. a balanced budget amendment, and limit the terms. Then you have to have 34 states that pass that out of their state legislatures. Governors don't have anything to do with it. And those states make application. As soon as there's 34 there, the Congress certifies and sets a date for a meeting of all 50 states to consider only those 3 things. And then once those 3 things have been considered and recommended amendments to the Constitution are made, the Congress then forwards those to the states for ratifications. There's 7 years that are allowed for these amendments to be looked at and either voted up or down. For it to pass, for it to become a constitutional amendment, like a balanced budget amendment, would require 38 states to say, yes, we agree to that. And then that becomes part of our Constitution. That becomes the founding fundamental guidepost for Congress living within its means, which they don't and refuse to. And it doesn't matter which party's in charge, none of them live within the means.
All right, give me your odds of having that done. I mean, it's a relatively simple thing, but you've got to have those legislators want to do it. Do you think that they'll go along with that?
Well, the state legislators are. We have 12 states that have already passed it. We have 3.6 million volunteers in the United States right now. We have a district captain in every legislative district in the country. I think we'll pass 8 more states this year. during this. That'll put us at 20. And I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll get to 34 states. And as we do that, then Congress is going to start looking over its shoulder and say, well, maybe we ought to pass a balanced budget amendment. Maybe we don't want that. Maybe we ought to live within our means. Maybe we ought to downsize the federal government's role and let the states start making more decisions for themselves. And as that happens, and maybe we ought to pass term limits. And if they were to do those things, we wouldn't care if there wasn't an amendments convention. But the fact is they're not going to. Here's the question that Colonel George Mason made during the Constitutional Convention. He said, when in history do you know a time that the central government has voluntarily ceded power back to its people? And of course, it's never happened in history. So this Congress isn't going to restore the relationship between a limited government and what's called federalism of the states. They're going to take more and more power towards Washington. And what we need is more and more power moved back to the states where you can actually have an impact on it, and those people making those decisions you can actually talk to. So the likelihood of Congress doing this is zero, and the likelihood of us as American citizens making the decision on who decides our future comes back to us. And I think that's going to happen. It's going to happen within the next 4 to 5 years.
Senator, that could save this country. Really, it could, because otherwise, the way we're going now, there seems to be no political will, as you say, to rein in spending. During Obama, it just went crazy, and it's still going up. Nothing's stopping that. So this could save the country. Am I overstating it?
Sure. No, Pat, there's $400 billion a year documented by the Government Accountability Office of waste, duplication, and fraud in the federal government right now. Right now. One of the reasons I left Congress early is because I couldn't get anybody to help me get rid of that. I mean, we know where it is. There's multiple duplicative programs that all do the same thing, running in multiple different agencies, and nobody wants to get rid of one of them. And none of them have any outcomes that are worthy of the amount of money that we put into them.
Yeah.
So where's the leadership to make the hard choices? It's not here. And so the whole idea is to force that leadership to live within their means, and number two, transfer those decisions where at least in Oklahoma we could lobby our state legislature and say, we don't want you spending that money that way.
Well, Senator,
So I think it's going to happen. I think we can save our country. I think we can cheat history, Pat. Every other republic before us has died. And they died over the same reasons that we're starting to go down the tubes as far as economics. And we can cheat history. And we should do it, and it takes real leadership, real courage by the American people to do it. They can help us by going to conventionofstates.com and signing up and becoming a volunteer. They can read this book so they can have a full understanding of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to have a constitutional convention. We're trying to restore the Constitution to what it was.
Cheat history, I like it. Senator Coburn, thank you for being with us. And
you bet. God bless you, man.
God bless you. Smashing the D.C. monopoly, Tom Coburn, M.D., Senator Coburn.